so fast paced. Like there's so many people, like when you're in a line and you're like, oh shit, man, I gotta order. What up, homies? Let's talk about feeling nervous when you're speaking in a foreign language. This is a cool topic, right? It's a very common experience, I think. A lot of us feel nervous. I think this is something that, like I said, a lot of us go through, a lot of people experience. I definitely experienced this, especially when I first came to Taiwan and I didn't really know how to speak that much. I remember every time when I would go to, order a dish, go to a restaurant, I would always feel nervous, apprehensive, especially like when I was trying to figure out what to order or, speaking with especially when the restaurants in Taiwan, like all the restaurants are so fast paced, like there's so many people, like when you're in a line and you're like, oh shit, man, I gotta order in time. There's people behind me waiting. So it's definitely a bit nerve wracking. But I think for me, at least, going through it, speaking Mandarin in Taiwan, doing it for a while now, I think it's something that I actually am grateful for. It's something that I actually think is a really good thing. I mean, if I think about being nervous in general, I think that it's something that is actually exciting. It's like, I don't know if I would want to live like every day without being a little bit nervous. I think being nervous has its pros and cons. But I think that it's something that can also excite me, and I think a lot of people too. I think nervousness is just excitement, interpreted differently or framed differently. Whenever I get nervous, there's always an initial feeling like, this is a bad feeling, or, things aren't going well, or, I want to go away, that fight or flight response. But I think that if you reframe it, if you think about it a little bit differently, it can actually be very exciting. It can be something that can be turned into, say, a challenge, something that you use to challenge yourself, sort of like a North Star almost. It's like, I mean, you're bound to, when you're nervous, it's probably, especially when you're talking to someone, when you're nervous, I mean, you can think about, why are you nervous? When you're learning a new language, you're probably nervous because you're afraid of what the other person is thinking about you, thinking of you. And you're afraid of other people judging you. Maybe you're afraid that they may be critiquing you, thinking that, your Chinese is not that good, your language is not that good. But really, that hasn't been my experience. I mean, I think we've all heard that over and over again. And so like what I usually like to do, I've mentioned this in my other videos, I usually like to sort of point the spotlight on the nervousness. I usually like to shine the spotlight, sort of just magnify it, or like some people say, like pointing out the elephant in the room. I think that's a great technique. It's something that I kind of naturally stumbled upon. So for example, when I first came to Taiwan, whenever I used to talk to a native speaker, I would always go, 不好意思，我的中文不太好, like, sorry, my Chinese is not that good. And I would always say that naturally in a way because I wanted to it was kind of like a defense mechanism. I mean, you could argue whether this is good in the long run, but I think early on, I think it serves its purpose. I think for me, it serves its purpose to help to sort of frame the situation, prime the situation in an interaction with a native speaker, and to basically say, hey, look, like, my Chinese is not that good, like, or just to say, hey, I'm a learner of this language. And that lowers my expectation to have to feel like I need to sound perfect. It also invites the other person to be interested in my situation. It also lowers their expectation. I think particularly, it was more useful for me because I have an Asian looking face, my face is pretty Asian. And so like when I'm in Taiwan, people can't tell immediately whether I'm Taiwanese or whether I'm not, or whether I'm an Asian born Canadian. Like, how are they going to know that unless I preface by saying something like that? If you're white, if you don't look Asian, I think probably it might be a little bit easier for you guys actually, because it's a little bit more obvious that you may not be a native speaker of the language. And so for me, I actually use this a lot just to prime the situation, just to let them know, hey, look, I'm not a native speaker of this language. And this allowed me to be comfortable to make more mistakes, to speak more freely, to be more comfortable speaking. And I think that this is, it's pretty helpful. It's sort of like highlighting your insecurities or your fears. It's sort of like, if you guys do meditation or if you guys journal, it's like just like writing out how you feel, highlighting things, shining light on things. If you do meditation, a lot of people talk about this, just focusing or just being aware of what feelings you have and just being okay with it. When you shine light on it, it sort of loses its power. But if you're constantly keeping it concealed and inside of you, if you have these thoughts of being nervous and because you're afraid of other people judging you, then and you don't vocalize it or you don't present it out, then that can oftentimes cause even more pressure, right? You might feel like because you're not vocalizing, you're like, it's just building up inside you. And then you may feel like even as the conversation grows, like as the conversation proceeds, you may feel like the pressure builds even more and you get even more nervous. So anyways, I like to release that pressure valve by just blatantly saying it, just pointing out the elephant in the room per se, and just saying, hey, my Chinese is not that good. So yeah, for those of you guys who are worried a bit about nervousness while speaking a language, I think it's totally it's totally normal. It's totally normal. I think everyone goes through it. It's a universal experience. Some people may be a little bit more extroverted and they may be more okay with making mistakes, or they may not worry as much, but that's fine. I mean, like, everyone's going to feel a little bit nervous. I think it's totally normal. I think we need to normalize this, but I think we can also try to reframe it and make it a little bit more fun and challenging. For example, one of the reasons why I came to Taiwan, I decided, I want to come to Taiwan, was mainly because I knew that it would really challenge me. It would force me to have to use a language because, I mean, you can learn a language without traveling, but maybe this is another topic in itself. But I think that traveling, for me at least, really pushes me out of my comfort zone. And I knew that because I traveled a lot before coming to Taiwan, but mostly smaller trips, shorter trips. And every time I traveled, I always was fascinated with languages, and I wish I had stayed longer in that country. And so I really knew that if I wanted to learn a country, a great way to do that was just to travel and live there for a period of time. And that was my thinking when I came to Taiwan. And so, every time I travel, it always pushes me a little bit out of my comfort zone to meet new people, because you're going there and you don't know anyone. So you're going to be lonely if you don't meet new people, if you don't make new friends, if you don't push yourself and start talking to people. And so I knew that every time I travel, I always get those feelings, that feeling of nervousness, of not knowing anyone, of being in a foreign country. And at first it was very nerve-wracking, but later on I interpreted it as more thrilling, as more exciting. And you can see that a lot of people, that's why they like traveling, because they like that thrill. And I think that language learning is no different. It's part of that nervousness that can be turned into a challenge, a thrill, an excitement. And so I use travel to help me with that. It's sort of a lever, a leverage to help me practice more of this pushing myself out of my comfort zone. It's sort of like a force function to force me to speak more, to have to use it because I need to use it to order food, to meet new people, to meet new friends, to go to the bank, go to the doctor, So a lot of these things, like, I may not necessarily be forced to do back at home if I was just learning this language for fun. And so a lot of these things, because I need to do it, I mean, just think about native speakers, think about babies, children, and going through the education system, talking to their parents. These are things that they're in an environment, like they're in an immersive environment, so they have to do these things. And so just think about people who work in their job is in a foreign language. Like, how fast would their language skills improve because they have to use it every single day, right? Anyways, just some thoughts on nervousness. I think, everyone faces it, everyone feels it. It's a normal part of language learning. Don't be too hard on yourself. We all feel it. And try to think about it a little bit differently. Try to think about it as a challenge and as something that can be exciting and fun. What do you guys think? Let me know. Do you guys get nervous when you're speaking in Chinese, in another foreign language? Let me know in the comment section below. What are your tips? What kind of tricks do you have to help combat this or to reframe it? Let me know, and I'll see you guys next time.